Let's make sure Mrs. Harris sits at the kids' table. We don't want any accidents tonight. That's the first thing my daughter-in-law said the moment I walked into the dining room, loud, crisp, and sharp enough to cut through the clinking glasses and piano music. 40 guests turned. Some tried to smile. Most pretended not to hear, but I heard every word. I'm 68. I raised a son on my own. I worked double shifts for 30 years. I paid off a house when no one believed I could. And yet, in that elegant Atlanta restaurant, a woman half my age, a white woman who married my son, decided to shrink me down to nothing with one sentence. She lifted a spotless white napkin and placed it on my lap as if I were a child. "Just so you don't make a mess," she whispered, smiling that polished, poisonous smile. My chest tightened. My hands didn't shake, but the room felt colder, heavier. People think humiliation breaks you, but sometimes it awakens something else. Because while she was busy parading her cruelty in front of everyone, she had no idea what I already knew. She didn't know what Malcolm was bringing to me that night. She didn't know what I had prepared, quietly, carefully, for weeks. So I stood up, excused myself politely, and walked out of the dining room. Not to cry, but to make room for the moment Truth would walk in and turn her world upside down. The moment I stepped back into the dining room, the air felt different. Heavy, buzzing, almost electric, like everyone at the table sensed something was about to happen but didn't know what. The chatter had softened into a polite hum. Forks clinked against plates. Glasses sparkled under the chandelier. But beneath that elegance was a tension that wrapped around my ribs and pulled tight. I took my seat quietly, the chair creaking just enough for a few heads to turn. My daughter-in-law, lace dress shimmering under the lights, sat across from me, her posture flawless, her expression carved from ice. A younger white woman with a practiced smile and a voice as crisp as a winter morning. She didn't acknowledge me at first. She continued chatting with her friends, touching her hair, laughing softly, perfectly, the way people do when they know the room is theirs. My son sat beside her, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes darting anywhere except toward me. He used to look at me like I was his anchor. Tonight, he looked like a man waiting for a storm he knew he helped create. A server approached to refill my water. Before he could pour, my daughter-in-law lifted her hand sharply. "No, no," she said, her tone sugary and cutting. "Just half a glass. Mrs. Harris tends to spill things when she gets overwhelmed." A couple at the next table raised their eyebrows. Someone stifled a gasp. The server froze, then nodded awkwardly and poured a thin stream of water like he'd been ordered to ration it. I felt the heat rush to my cheeks, but I kept my hands still on my lap. I've lived long enough to know that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Silence terrifies bullies more than anger ever will. But she wasn't done. She leaned back in her chair and tapped her glass with a fork. The soft chime cut through the room, causing conversations to pause and eyes to lift in our direction. "I just want to take a moment," she announced brightly, "to thank everyone for being here tonight. It's a special evening for us." Then she turned her head slightly, letting her gaze trail slowly toward me, like a spotlight sliding across a stage until it lands on the one person who hoped to stay in the shadows. And for making sure everything stays peaceful tonight, we've arranged a special seating plan. We want to keep things safe, you know? Her friends giggled. A few guests exchanged confused glances. She gave a small laugh, then the line that sliced me clean. "Let's make sure Mrs. Harris sits at the kids' table. We don't want any accidents tonight." The words dropped like glass shattering on a marble floor. One woman covered her mouth. A man whispered, "Wow." Another shook his head slowly, as if even he couldn't believe the cruelty. I felt myself shrinking, not because of her words, but because of the silence that followed. Silence, loud, suffocating, sharp enough to cut through bone. People saw me. They saw her. They heard everything. and yet not one of them said a thing. My daughter-in-law smiled sweetly, stood up and picked up a white linen napkin. She walked around the table with poised steps, the room watching as if this were some kind of performance. Then she reached me, bent slightly, and draped the napkin across my lap. "There we go," she murmured, "just in case." Her perfume, citrus and something floral, filled my nose, and for a moment my vision blurred, not from tears, from restraint, from the sheer weight of keeping every part of myself from breaking open in front of these strangers. "You okay, Mom?" my son asked softly, guilt peeking through the cracks of his voice. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I didn't see the boy I raised. I saw a man who had slowly drifted away from me, inch by inch, year by year, until one day he didn't even notice the cliff he pushed me toward. "I'm fine," I said, my voice steady, a lie wrapped in iron. But inside, things were shifting. There's a moment every woman knows, the moment when humiliation stops burning and starts hardening, when shame no longer crushes, but sharpens. That moment arrived for me like a door opening in a dark room. The room laughed softly at another one of her jokes, but it all sounded distant. My focus tunneled into a single thought, pulsing like a heartbeat. This ends tonight. She believed she held the entire room in her manicured hand. She believed I was small, powerless, slow, easy to push aside. She believed she could humiliate me publicly and walk away with my dignity trailing behind her heels. She believed a lot of things, but what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that humiliation doesn't just wound. Sometimes it awakens the lion that's been sleeping quietly in the corner, and mine was fully awake now. I reached for my phone under the table. My fingers moved slow, controlled, deliberate. One message, one name. "We're ready, come in." I set the phone down. Then I lifted my glass, not to toast her, not to acknowledge her, but to steady myself for what was coming. Because the moment the dining room doors opened again, everything she built on lies, manipulation, and entitlement would start to crumble, and she wouldn't see it coming, not even when it was standing right behind her. I excused myself from the table with a calmness I didn't fully feel. My chair slid back so quietly that no one even noticed I was gone, except her. I saw her eyes flick up for a split second, that little victorious smirk forming, as if she believed she had driven me into retreat. Little did she know, a retreat is only a retreat when you have nothing left. What I had was ammunition. I stepped out into the hallway leading toward the private restrooms. The music from the dining room softened behind me until it sounded like a distant echo. Here, the air felt cooler, the lighting dimmer, like the world had narrowed down to the few feet between me and the truth I carried. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing was steady. My mind was clearer than it had been in years. Humiliation has a strange way of sharpening the senses. Suddenly, I could hear everything. The faint buzz of the ceiling light, the muffled clinking of cutlery inside, even the soft thud of my own heartbeat, slow and controlled. I pulled my phone from my purse. There were 2 names saved under favorites, my son's and Malcolm's. My thumb hovered for a moment over my son's name. For years, that would have been my first call any time something hurt, any time life cut deeper than I could bear. He had been my pride, my purpose. I used to think our bond was iron strong, but recently, iron had begun to rust. I closed my eyes, inhaled sharply, then tapped the name I needed. Malcolm. He picked up on the second ring. "Mrs. Harris?" His voice was deep, steady, the kind of voice that could calm storm water. "It's time," I whispered. There was no hesitation, only purpose. "I'm downstairs," he said, "with the folder. Do you want me to come up now?" "Give me 5 minutes. Enter through the left door so they don't see you at first." Understood. I slipped the phone back into my purse, the weight of it grounding me. For a moment, I leaned against the wall, letting the chill of the smooth plaster steady my spine. I wasn't running away from the table. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't fragile. I was preparing. The hallway door swung open behind me and someone stepped in, a young woman, maybe late 20s, wearing a soft peach dress. She smiled politely at first, then her eyes shifted with recognition. "You're Mrs. Harris, right?" she asked, lowering her voice. "Yes," I said. She hesitated before speaking again. I'm sorry for what she said back there. That was uncalled for." Her eyebrows knit together, genuine concern flickering in her expression. "A lot of us saw it. We just didn't know if we should say something." I gave her a small nod. "It's all right, dear. People show their character when they think no one will challenge them." The young woman swallowed hard, then whispered, "She talks about you like you're a problem. But seeing you now, I don't understand why." I smiled, not out of pride, but out of the relief of being seen, even for a moment, by someone who had no reason to lie. "Thank you," I said softly. She left and the door closed behind her. I stood alone again, but I didn't feel alone. I felt something rising in me, strength I thought I had lost, dignity she tried to strip away, and a fire burning brighter than any shame she could throw at me. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, a 68-year-old black woman with braids touched with silver, eyes lined by years of work, sacrifice, and survival. A woman who had raised a son alone, a woman who had built her life with her bare hands, a woman who had been quiet for too long. My reflection didn't look fragile. It looked fierce. It looked ready. My phone buzzed, a text from Malcolm. "In position, standing by." I took one last breath and straightened my back. Then the dining room door cracked open behind me, just enough for me to hear a voice I recognized too well, her voice, cheerful, patronizing, dripping with polished poison. "She just gets confused sometimes," she said to the guest next to her. "It's best if we take care of all her decisions." Another voice chimed in. "Is she really that bad?" She laughed gently, the way women laugh when pretending to care. "You have no idea." I felt something inside me snap, not with rage, but with clarity. This wasn't just humiliation. It was theft. Theft of dignity. Theft of agency. Theft of truth. I reached for the doorknob. Inside that room was a woman who thought she owned the narrative. Outside this room was the truth about to walk in. And when I stepped back through those doors, I wasn't going in as the woman she tried to disgrace. I was going in as the woman who was about to end her performance. For good. The night Malcolm waited downstairs, ready to walk into that dining room, my mind drifted back, uninvited but clear as daylight, to the very first time I met the woman who would one day call herself my daughter-in-law. It was 8 years ago, a warm Saturday morning in Atlanta, the kind of morning when the air feels like velvet and sunlight spills through the windows like honey. I was in my kitchen, frying catfish and flipping biscuits the way my mother taught me. Slow, steady, patient. My son, Marcus, had called earlier that week, sounding more nervous than usual. "Ma," he said, clearing his throat more times than needed. "I want you to meet someone. She's important to me." Important. He'd used that word exactly 3 other times in his life. Graduating college, proposing his first business plan, and telling me he was moving out. So when the doorbell rang that morning, I wiped my hands on my apron and smoothed my hair, heart thudding with a strange mixture of excitement and hope. I opened the door, and there she stood, Elizabeth, tall, slim, hair the color of wheat in July, skin pale as porcelain, a white summer dress flowing lightly around her like she'd stepped out of one of those glossy lifestyle magazines. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect everything. She extended her hand before I could say a word. "Mrs. Harris," she said, voice bright but measured. "I've heard so much about you." Her handshake was firm, but her eyes flicked over me with precision. My sandals, my apron, my home. Not with curiosity, with assessment. Most people smile with their eyes. Hers didn't move. Marcus stepped beside her, his face glowing with pride. "Ma, this is Elizabeth. Liz." Liz. The nickname sounded too easy, too familiar for a woman who didn't offer familiarity in return. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her eyes sweeping across my living room. The quilt on the couch, the church program on the table, the family photos lining the wall. "Oh," she said, pausing before one picture of Marcus in his graduation gown. "This place is cozy." Cozy. That word, the polite person's insult. She said it with the kind of smile women use when they're pretending to compliment your dress, but really suggesting you should have ironed it. I let the word hang in the air for a moment before turning toward the kitchen. "I made breakfast," I said. "Marcus told me you like Southern food." Her lips twitched. "I grew up eating lighter things, greens, proteins, less fried." Marcus nudged her, whispering, "Babe?" But she just smiled wider, like she enjoyed being the center of a conversation no one asked for. We sat at the table. I served them plates. Marcus dove in happily, humming with every bite like he was 10 again. Elizabeth, though, stabbed gently at a biscuit, as if unsure whether it was safe to eat. "It's good," she said after taking the tiniest bite possible. "Different, but good." Different. Another polite dagger. I watched her carefully, not with suspicion, but with the quiet curiosity of a woman who has lived long enough to recognize patterns. I've met women like her before, women who move through the world certain of two things: that they belong everywhere, and that other people should prove their worth before being allowed near them. Halfway through breakfast, she placed her fork down and folded her hands gracefully. "So," she said, "Marcus tells me you work at the hospital. You're a nurse?" "A retired one," I replied. "I worked there 32 years. "That's admirable," she said, tilting her head slightly. Admiration laced with condescension. "I guess it must feel good to help people, even without a college degree." Marcus choked on his orange juice. "Liz!" he hissed. She blinked innocently. "What?" "It's not an insult. My father always said people who work with their hands have a special kind of strength." I didn't rise to the bait. I had survived worse. I simply smiled. "Your father's right," I said calmly. "Working with your hands teaches you who you are and who you're not." Her smile tightened. For a brief second, her mask slipped, like a crack appearing in fine china. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone she'd already judged. When they got up to leave, she extended her hand again. "It was lovely meeting you," she said. "I can see why Marcus talks about you so much." But the tone was off, too polished, too rehearsed. I shook her hand, feeling a quiet chill settle under my skin. After the door closed, Marcus turned back, rubbing the back of his neck. "So," he asked, hopeful, "what do you think?" I looked at him, at the man I raised, at the boy who used to grip my pinky finger and call me his whole world. "She's something," I said carefully. He grinned. "I know, right?" I wanted to smile for him. I wanted to be happy for him. But something deep inside me, the part of me that has always protected him, always known more than he thinks I do, whispered a truth I didn't want to hear. "This woman will try to take him away from you, and she will not stop until she gets what she wants." Back then, I didn't know how right I was. But on the night of that dinner, as Malcolm waited downstairs with the folder that would expose her, every memory snapped back into place like puzzle pieces forming a picture I should have seen long ago. I didn't just meet my son's future wife that Saturday morning. I met the storm that would one day try to swallow me whole. If I'm honest, the night of the dinner wasn't the first time she tried to humiliate me. It was simply the moment she stopped pretending. Long before the white napkin, before the kids' table, before the whisper about putting me in a care home. There were smaller cuts, quiet ones, sharp ones. The kind that don't bleed right away but bruise deep. And the worst part? Marcus never noticed. The first cut came during their engagement dinner. We were at a rooftop restaurant, nothing fancy, but nice enough to feel special. I had brought a wrapped gift, a quilt I'd spent months stitching by hand, dark blue and gold, the colors of the church choir she claimed to love. Elizabeth unwrapped it, lifted it delicately, then smiled politely. "Oh, this is very traditional." Traditional. The polite way to say outdated. She handed it to Marcus as if it were a coat someone asked her to hold. "It'll be good for the guest room," she added. Cut 1. Months later, when they moved into their townhome, I went over to drop off a casserole. My son's favorite, macaroni and cheese with the crunchy topping he used to beg for as a child. When I arrived, Elizabeth opened the door, eyebrows raised. "Oh," she said, staring at the casserole tin like it was a suspicious package. "How thoughtful." Marcus came to the door, grinned, kissed my cheek, took the casserole, and started to open the tin. Elizabeth's voice sliced through the moment. "Marcus, not on the counter. It'll make everything smell heavy." She took the casserole, walked it straight to the refrigerator, and shut the door with a soft click. "It's better cold," she said, cut 2. When the baby came, a sweet little boy with my nose and my son's sleepy eyes, I felt whole again. I thought maybe Elizabeth would soften. Motherhood does that to some women, but not her. I reached out to hold my grandson one afternoon, hands freshly washed, sanitizer on the counter. She hesitated. Maybe just let me pass him to you," she said, shifting the baby protectively. "Your hands shake sometimes." "They don't," I said softly. "Well, just in case." Just in case. Another blow. Cut 3. At his first birthday, she assigned seats. I didn't think much of it until I saw mine, at a foldable table set off to the side, decorated with leftover balloons and paper plates printed with cartoon dinosaurs. A children's table. "I thought you'd be more comfortable here," she chirped. "It's closer to the floor, safer." I looked at the chairs. The legs wobbled. "I'm not 85, Elizabeth," I said. She smiled sweetly. "Of course not. Just being cautious." Marcus wasn't even looking. He was busy recording the baby smashing cake into his face. Cut 4. But the deepest cut, deeper than every insult, every slight, every polite dagger, was the day I realized she was slowly rewriting the truth about me to my own son. It happened one quiet afternoon. I visited to drop off a few groceries because Marcus had been complaining about long work nights. When I arrived, I heard voices from the living room, low, tight, urgent. "She forgets things, Marcus," Elizabeth whispered. "It's not safe for her to drive alone." "I don't know. She seems fine," he said hesitantly. "That's the problem. She seems fine. You didn't see her last week. She misplaced her keys twice." I stepped closer, stunned. "I misplaced my keys because your dog dragged my purse under the sofa," I muttered under my breath. Unheard. Elizabeth continued, "We need to think long term. Your mother is getting older, and if we're going to handle finances responsibly, we have to be realistic about her capacity." Capacity. As if I were a broken machine. Marcus sighed heavily. "Liz, maybe not now." She touched his arm. "If we don't do it now, it'll be too late later." Cut 5. The one that went straight to the bone. And it didn't stop there. Every holiday, every family gathering, every Sunday dinner, there was something. Some small correction, some belittling remark, some calculated gesture meant to shrink me. At Thanksgiving, she told me my sweet potato pie was too sweet for modern diets. At Christmas, she suggested I sit during the family photo to rest my knees. During a church fundraiser, she introduced me to a couple from her job as Marcus's mom. She's retired now, so she's finally got free time. Each remark left a mark, little dents, little bruises, little reminders that in her perfect world, I was an inconvenience. But the worst part wasn't her. It was the slow realization that Marcus had begun believing her. He started speaking to me slower, as if I needed processing time. He repeated things twice, just to be sure I heard. He corrected me about dates, times, places, even when I was right. She wasn't just painting me as fragile. She was painting me as incompetent. I tried to brush it off, tried to smile, tried to be patient. I told myself it was just stress, just new motherhood, just two personalities clashing. But deep down, I knew the truth. She didn't want to coexist with me. She wanted to erase me, gently, politely, socially, until the only version of me left was the one she invented. And the night of the dinner was the night she finally tried to finish the job. The strange thing about cruelty is that it leaves echoes. Even after the moment passes, something stays behind, a faint trembling in the chest, a whisper that says, "Pay attention, something is wrong." And I did. I paid attention to everything. The first echo came on a Thursday morning, months before that disastrous dinner. I was at my local credit union. Nothing unusual, just checking my savings, paying a few bills, chatting with the receptionist who had known me since Marcus was in middle school. Her name was Daphne. Kind-hearted, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who remembered your birthday even if she barely knew you. But that morning she looked uneasy. "Mrs. Harris," she said, lowering her voice, "did you try logging into your online account last night?" "No," I said slowly. "Why?" Her eyes flickered with concern. There were 3 failed login attempts from a different device. Out-of-state IP. It triggered a security check. I frowned. Out of state? She hesitated. "We usually assume it's a mistake, but we've seen an increase in identity fraud targeting seniors lately." Seniors. Another word that stung more than it should have. "Someone's trying to get into my account?" I asked quietly. "It might be harmless," she said, "but if it wasn't you, I'd stay cautious." I thanked her, but something inside me twisted. Something cold and familiar, like the feeling I got every time Elizabeth spoke to me with that stiff, polished kindness. I went home with a knot in my stomach. That night, I sat at my dining table staring at the login screen, thinking about the attempts, thinking about the timing, thinking about the person in my life who had the most to gain from knowing my balances. That was the moment I called Malcolm. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was my late sister's best friend, practically family. He'd handled my retirement paperwork, my mortgage, even the arrangement of my investments when I left the hospital. He was the man I trusted when I didn't trust myself. "Unusual login attempts?" he repeated over the phone. "How many?" "3, I said. "From out of state?" "Yes." There was a pause. Long, thoughtful, heavy. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "I'm coming over." When he arrived, he didn't step inside right away. He stood on my porch, scanned the street, then finally walked in and closed the door behind him. "Tell me what's been happening," he said. And for the first time, I told someone everything. From the casserole incident to the keys under the sofa to the whispers about my capacity. Malcolm listened, jaw tightening more with every sentence. "I don't like this," he said. "This sounds coordinated." "Coordinated?" I repeated, heart thumping. He nodded. "People don't just insult you casually and at the same time try to undermine your financial independence. That's a pattern, a strategy." A chill rippled through me. "Are you saying she's trying to control my accounts?" I whispered. "I'm saying someone is preparing the ground. First make you look forgetful, then make you look dependent, then make you look incompetent. Once people believe that..." He let the sentence hang. "They can challenge your financial autonomy." Challenge, a soft word with sharp teeth. Malcolm opened his laptop. "Let me run a few checks." For the next 40 minutes, I watched him type, scroll, frown, shake his head, then type again. Finally, he turned the screen toward me. "Here," he said. 3 attempts were flagged from an IP in North Carolina. But this, he clicked again. 2 more attempts from a local device. Someone using a different browser. It was blocked, but my breath caught. Local. I whispered. As in, nearby? As in, inside your son's house, he said gently. The world tilted slightly beneath my feet. I forced myself to sit down. How do you know? Because the device fingerprint matches the same Wi-Fi network they've used when you video call Marcus from their living room. Their router has a unique ID. It matched. I swallowed hard, throat tightening. So they tried from out of state, and then from their house. Correct. Why would they? My voice cracked. Malcolm exhaled. I think Elizabeth, or someone in her family, knows you have more assets than they originally thought. I blinked, confused. What assets? I have my savings, my retirement, the house, and the land, he added. My heart stopped for a beat. Land, he nodded. The land your late husband purchased decades ago. Marcus's father. You never sold it. I forgot it still exists, I murmured. It's just a few acres outside Savannah, worth almost nothing years ago. Not anymore, Malcolm said. A developer bought nearby property last February. Your land's value has tripled. Tripled. I felt the air leave my lungs. So they know, I whispered. They know about the land. Someone knows, Malcolm corrected, and someone is preparing to use your supposed declining capacity to gain control of it. I stared at the table, everything inside me collapsing into one terrifying truth. Elizabeth wasn't just belittling me. She wasn't just making social jabs. She wasn't just trying to distance Marcus from me. She was building a legal case, a narrative, a story where I become the old, fragile woman who couldn't handle her own life. And the minute people believed that, she could petition for control of my assets. Malcolm reached across the table, placing his hand over mine. You're not powerless, he said. You're not alone. And whatever they think they're doing, we're going to stop it. I nodded, breath shaky but resolve growing stronger by the second. Because finally, after months of quiet cuts, whispers, and stolen dignity, I had the truth. And nothing fuels a woman like me more than knowing the truth. I should have realized something was off the moment Elizabeth texted me that morning. Dinner tonight. Dress nicely. We have something important to discuss as a family. Not celebrate, not enjoy, not join us, discuss. That word tasted like metal, formal, cold, prepared. But I went anyway. Because when you're a mother, even a worried one, you still hope, foolishly, that maybe this time things will be different. Maybe this time she won't try to shrink me. Maybe this time she won't chip away at my dignity and call it concern. But when I arrived at their townhome that afternoon, I knew, before I even stepped inside, that this wasn't a dinner. It was an ambush. Marcus opened the door, smiling nervously. Hey, Ma. His eyes darted downward, avoiding mine like a child who broke a lamp and was waiting to confess. Come in. We're in the living room. I stepped inside. Elizabeth sat on the couch, legs crossed, posture stiff as a ruler. Beside her was a stack of papers, and across from her, occupying the armchair usually meant for guests, was a man I'd never seen before. White, middle-aged, suit too sharp for a casual family meeting. He stood the moment I entered. Mrs. Harris, he said, offering a hand I didn't take. I'm Robert Coleman, the family attorney. My heart sank. Family attorney? Since when did they have a family attorney? Elizabeth smiled, that careful smile she used when she was about to do something cruel and wanted it to look like kindness. Please sit, she said. We want to talk about your well-being. Her tone was sweet, too sweet. Poison dipped in honey. Marcus sat next to her, shoulders slumped like he'd been dragged into something he didn't fully understand. I sat slowly, placing my purse beside me. What's this about? I asked. Elizabeth folded her hands. Well, with everything going on lately, your forgetfulness, your stress, the keys. The dog dragged my purse, I snapped gently. She blinked, unfazed. And last week when you repeated the date wrong, Because you told me the wrong date, I corrected. Robert cleared his throat, stepping in as though this were a courtroom. We understand aging can be challenging, Mrs. Harris. We want to support you by easing your responsibilities. I straightened. Responsibilities? Like what? Elizabeth leaned forward. Your finances. There it was. The mask finally dropped. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Liz, maybe we should... No, she said calmly. She needs to hear this. Elizabeth picked up the top stack of papers. Densely printed, stapled, official-looking. Marcus and I have talked, she continued, and with your memory issues, we feel it's safest if we help manage your accounts. Just temporarily, of course. Temporarily. The slipperiest lie in the English language. We even had Robert draft a simple document, she added. Just sign it and we'll take care of everything so you can relax. Relax. Another word that meant surrender. I reached for the papers, not to sign, just to see. The title hit me like a hammer. Financial Management and Durable Power of Attorney Agreement. Durable, meaning permanent. Meaning binding even if they declared I was mentally incompetent. My stomach tightened. Marcus swallowed hard. Ma, it's just to help. We're trying to make things easier on you. I looked at my son, the boy I raised, the man who once trusted me with every truth in his life. He stared at me with an expression I'd never seen from him before. Pity, directed at me. Elizabeth nodded toward the paper. Just sign at the bottom. It's only a formality. A formality? A trap wrapped in satin. I placed the papers on my lap, fingers grazing the crisp edges. You want me to sign this now? Yes, she said. Tonight, before dinner. Before dinner. Before witnesses. Before Malcolm arrived with the truth she didn't know existed. I smiled slowly, soft, calm, deadly. Let me ask you something, I said. What makes you think I need help managing my money? Elizabeth didn't miss a beat. Because you're not as sharp as you used to be, Mrs. Harris, and we're thinking ahead. Thinking ahead? I repeated. Robert interjected. If you refuse, your children may have grounds to petition. I held up my hand. No one is petitioning anything. The room fell silent. I stood up, folded the papers neatly, and placed them on the table. I'm not signing this, I said. Elizabeth's eyebrows lifted. Excuse me? I'm not signing, I repeated, voice steady. Not now, not ever. Marcus's eyes widened. Ma, just listen. No, I said firmly. I have listened. I have watched. I have endured more than you realize. Elizabeth stood too, chin lifting. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, I whispered. You are. Her face changed. The sweetness evaporated. Something sharp and victorious flickered beneath her calm expression. Fine, she said coldly, but don't say we didn't try. You'll regret this. She turned sharply toward the dining room. Marcus followed, confused but compliant. I stood there alone, the echo of her threat lingering in the air. You'll regret this. She had no idea. Because at that exact moment, Malcolm texted, 1 hour. I'll meet you at the restaurant. The ambush she planned for me was already turning into the one she'd never recover from. The hour between leaving their house and arriving at the restaurant felt like walking through a tunnel lined with memories I didn't want anymore. Every insult, every smirk, every condescending just in case echoed behind me like footsteps. But something had changed. This time, I wasn't walking with my head down. I wasn't walking as the woman they tried to shrink. I was walking as a woman preparing for war. When I got home, Malcolm was already there, leaning against his black SUV, laptop bag in hand, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, ready to work. He wasn't just a lawyer tonight. He was my witness, my shield, my strategist. You ready? He asked. I've been ready for years, I said. He nodded once, long and slow, like someone who respected the steel he saw in front of him. Inside my living room, he spread out folders across the coffee table, Thick ones, thin ones, clipped stacks, printed spreadsheets, manila envelopes, each one labeled neatly: bank, property, medical, emails, evidence, notarized statements. "First," he said, "we protect your autonomy. Everything else comes second." He pulled out a document stamped with the seal of a medical evaluator. "This is a capacity assessment," he explained. "We did it last month, remember?" I nodded. It was routine. I hadn't thought much of it then. "You passed it with perfect clarity," he said. "Your cognitive scores were exceptional. This alone shuts down any attempt to claim you're mentally unfit." He placed it on top of the stack labeled Primary Defense. Next, he opened a folder filled with printed emails. "These," he said, "are the attempted logins, time-stamped, IP tracked, cross-matched with their devices." I stared at the pages, the undeniable proof that someone in their home had tried to breach my accounts. Malcolm tapped the corner of one page. "This also shows escalation, first out of state, then local. They didn't just try, they tried multiple times and from multiple locations. That shows intent." Intent, a word lawyers don't use casually. He flipped to the next pile. "Now, your land." My breath stilled as he handed me an appraisal. The 7 acres my husband bought for pennies decades ago were now worth more than everything else I owned combined. "Developers put an offer on nearby plots," Malcolm said. "Your land is prime. Whoever gets power of attorney over you gets control of this land." "And Elizabeth knows," I whispered. He nodded grimly. "Someone in that household does." I pressed my lips together. The land wasn't just property. It was my husband's dream, a piece of earth he wanted to pass to our son, to our grandchildren. And she wanted to take it, not to honor him, not to preserve it, to sell it and walk away with every dime. Malcolm opened another folder, this one thicker than the rest. "These are sworn statements from people who've witnessed her behavior toward you," he said. "Your neighbor, that cashier from the grocery store, even the lady at the pharmacy who saw her questioning your prescriptions." I blinked. "The pharmacy?" He nodded. "Apparently, she asked if you were getting confused with medications." My jaw tightened. Of course she did. Malcolm continued. "This pile also includes financial records showing she and her family are in significant debt." "How significant?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "6 figures." I felt my heartbeat drop. Slow, heavy, dangerous. "So this wasn't personal," I whispered. "It was strategic." "Both," Malcolm said. "She wanted to belittle you socially and disable you legally." He gathered everything and placed it neatly into one large binder. "When I walk into that restaurant tonight, I'm not coming in empty-handed," he said. "We are coming in with truth, proof, and leverage." I watched him close the binder with a soft thud. The sound felt like the locking of a vault. "Now," he said, "your part." "My part?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Protect your energy and cut off every channel they've been feeding from." He slid a small checklist toward me. Change online bank passwords, lock savings account, separate retirement funds, freeze credit contact title company, about the land, revoke automatic transfers to Marcus, remove him as secondary on emergency contacts. Each line was a step toward freedom. Each checkmark was a reclaiming of myself. I went through everything slowly, methodically. Change password, done. Lock savings, done. Freeze credit, done. Every click felt like cutting a string they'd tied around my wrists without permission. When I canceled the automatic transfer Marcus never bothered to mention he depended on, I paused. Not out of guilt, but out of grief. Grief for the son who had let himself be led away from me. Grief for the boy who once promised he'd always stand by me. Malcolm placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You're not punishing him," he said. "You're protecting yourself." I nodded, wiping a single tear with the back of my hand. When the final box was checked, Malcolm handed me one last item, a small recorder. "We won't need it tonight," he said, "but keep it in your bag, always." I placed it beside the binder. Then he adjusted his tie, rolled his sleeves down, and slipped into his jacket. "You ready?" he asked again. This time, I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said, standing tall. "Let's end this." We left the house together, me with my purse, him with the binder filled with everything she never imagined I'd uncover. And with every step toward that restaurant, I felt the weight of years lift from my spine. Tonight, the woman she tried to erase was about to become the woman she'd never forget. As Malcolm stepped through the restaurant doors, I was already seated again, back straight, chin lifted, the white napkin still lying across my lap like a silent witness to every humiliation I had endured. The violinist was playing something soft, delicate, almost fragile. Fitting, I thought. The calm before a storm no one saw coming. Elizabeth was mid-sentence when she stopped talking. Her eyes flicked to the entrance, narrowing like she'd caught a scent she didn't recognize. Marcus turned too, confused. The guests at nearby tables glanced over, curious. Malcolm walked in like a man with nothing to prove, tall, composed, carrying a thick black binder in his left hand. His suit wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. His presence alone shifted the air. The violinist made a sudden mistake, a high note slipping off-key. Elizabeth's spine went rigid. Marcus blinked. Mom? Who is that?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Malcolm approached our table, placed the binder down with a soft but unmistakable thud, and offered me a respectful nod. "Mrs. Harris," he said, voice calm but loud enough for every table in a 5-foot radius to hear. "Sorry I'm late." Elizabeth's face drained of color. She stood quickly, plastering on a smile so forced it looked painful. I beg your pardon, but can we help you?" she asked. Malcolm didn't even look at her. He opened the binder, and the room fell silent. I swear I could feel 40 sets of lungs tighten at once. The server froze halfway to a table. Someone's wine glass stopped midair. Even the violinist lowered his bow. Malcolm finally lifted his eyes to Elizabeth, gaze cold and sharp as a blade. "Well," he said lightly, "that depends. Are you the person who's been attempting illegal access to Mrs. Harris's financial accounts?" Her jaw dropped. A wave of whispers rippled through the restaurant. What did he just say? Illegal access? Oh my God, she's in trouble. Elizabeth sputtered. I don't know what you're implying. Malcolm held up a paper. February 14th, 3 login attempts from a North Carolina IP address. Another page, March 2nd, 2 attempts from your home network, same router ID, same device fingerprint. Another page, April 9th, attempted access to retirement funds, blocked. He laid each sheet down, slow and deliberate. Elizabeth's hands trembled. This is ridiculous. Marcus, say something. Tell him. Marcus looked between her and the documents, his face collapsing like a house made of sand. Liz, what is this? She stuttered. I don't... He's fabricating. This is... Malcolm cleared his throat. We also have statements from your neighbors, the cashier at the grocery store, the pharmacist, and multiple individuals who have witnessed your ongoing attempts to portray Mrs. Harris as mentally incompetent. A gasp rolled across the room. I stayed silent, hands folded neatly in my lap. Malcolm continued, turning the page. And here, he held up a notarized medical evaluation, the seal catching the chandelier's light, is documented proof that Mrs. Harris has full cognitive capacity, no impairment, no decline, no justification whatsoever for your attempts to obtain durable power of attorney. Elizabeth's eyes widened with horror. Marcus covered his mouth with one shaking hand. Someone at a nearby table whispered, "Oh, she's finished!" Elizabeth suddenly snapped. "This is a misunderstanding," she cried. We were just trying to help her. She's forgetful. She's emotional. She misplaces things. Tell them, Marcus." Marcus didn't speak. He stared at the stack of papers, realization crashing down on him like a tidal wave. Malcolm leaned forward, voice low, controlled. "What you attempted, Mrs. Wilson, is considered financial manipulation and elder exploitation under Georgia law." The word exploitation cracked through the air like thunder. Elizabeth stepped back so fast her chair screeched against the floor. "That's not, you can't accuse me." "I'm not accusing you," Malcolm replied evenly. "The evidence is." The room buzzed, phones out, whispers everywhere, people refusing to look away. Elizabeth looked around wildly. "Stop staring," she burst out. "This is a private matter." I finally stood. The napkin slid from my lap, floating to the floor like a fallen feather. Every eye turned to me. I looked at Elizabeth, the woman who had spent years slicing at my dignity with a smile, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. I felt whole. I felt finished. "You wanted an audience tonight," I said quietly. "So here it is." Her lips trembled. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "No," I said. "Fair would have been treating me with the respect I earned. Fair would have been honesty. Fair would have been dignity." I stepped closer, my voice steady, calm, lethal. "But you wanted to shame me. You wanted to erase me. And now, everyone sees who you really are." A woman behind us whispered, "Lord." She read her soul. Marcus sank into his chair, hands covering his face. Elizabeth's breath came out in ragged gasps. "Marcus, please." He didn't look at her. Malcolm closed the binder with a final resounding click. "Mrs. Harris," he said gently, "we're done here." I nodded, and without a single tear, without a single apology, without 1 ounce of the humiliation she hoped I'd carry, I walked out of that restaurant with my head high, my dignity intact, and my future back in my own hands. Elizabeth remained behind, frozen, exposed, and utterly alone. The moment Malcolm and I turned toward the exit, the entire restaurant seemed to split into 2 worlds. The world behind me, where Elizabeth's empire of lies collapsed, and the world ahead, where I was finally walking free. But I hadn't taken more than 6 steps when chaos erupted behind us. Wait, Marcus, do something." Elizabeth's voice cracked, sharp and panicked. I didn't turn back, but Malcolm slowed just enough for us to hear everything clearly. Marcus pushed his chair back so hard it nearly tipped. "Elizabeth, what was all of that?" "It's lies," she shrieked. "All of it. He's manipulating your mother. Don't you see that?" But her voice trembled, her hands trembled, her certainty trembled, and everyone saw it. A middle-aged couple nearby exchanged looks. Someone recorded discreetly. A server bit her lip, unsure whether to intervene or pretend not to hear. Marcus picked up one of the documents Malcolm had left on the table, scanning it with shaking hands. Elizabeth, these are our devices. Our Wi-Fi, our dates." His voice cracked. "Did you really try to access my mother's accounts?" She let out a hysterical laugh. "Of course not. I was checking something. You know how financial systems work. I didn't mean anything. He's framing me." Framing. The word hung in the air like a desperate final thread. Marcus held up another paper. "You Googled how to get power of attorney over aging parent?" "That wasn't..." "Marcus, stop taking it literally." The restaurant gasped. Someone whispered, "Lord have mercy." Elizabeth's face crumpled. She lunged forward, snatching for the papers, but they slipped through her fingers and scattered across the table like broken feathers. "Marcus, listen to me," she begged, voice unraveling. "Your mother is manipulating all of us. She's doing this to turn you against me." Marcus stepped back. For the first time in a long time, he looked at me, really looked, as if waking up from a long sleep. "Mom." "I didn't know," he whispered. Elizabeth spun toward him, eyes wild. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "Don't you dare take her side." A server approached timidly. "Excuse me, but we still need payment for the private dining room." Elizabeth froze. Marcus closed his eyes. The server continued gently. "Your card on file was declined, ma'am. Do you have another?" Elizabeth reached into her purse with shaking hands, pulling out a shiny gold card and slapping it onto the tray. "Run it!" she snapped. 30 seconds passed. Then the server returned, cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry, this one declined too." Elizabeth stared at her as if the world had betrayed her. "That's impossible," she whispered. Marcus rubbed his forehead. "Liz, you said we paid off that balance." I thought we did," she stammered, voice cracking. "Maybe they flagged it. Maybe there's a glitch. Marcus, say something." "Ma'am," the server said again, voice firmer, "we'll need another form of payment." Elizabeth's breath hitched. She looked at Marcus desperately. "Give them your card." Marcus blinked. "Mine? You told me to cancel mine because we needed to consolidate expenses." Elizabeth's face went sheet white. A woman at a nearby table murmured, "Oh, she messed up." Marcus stood, gripping the back of his chair. "Liz, were you planning to pay this bill at all?" Elizabeth opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The truth was written all over her face. Not one person in that room offered her a lifeline. Not one. She had burnt every bridge with gasoline and then struck the match herself. She lifted her chin, trying to salvage dignity that had already slipped between her fingers. "Fine," she said sharply. "We'll figure it out later. Let's just go." But the manager stepped forward, blocking her path politely but firmly. "Ma'am, I'm afraid we cannot allow guests to leave without settling their bill." The humiliation she had scripted for me was now unfolding around her, piece by piece, like a stage play she no longer controlled. Marcus swallowed hard. "I'll pay it," he muttered, pulling out his wallet, one that was noticeably thinner than the last time I'd seen it. Elizabeth didn't thank him. She didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. She simply stared at me, as if I were the force undoing her life, when really she had undone herself. I met her gaze, steady and calm. This was never revenge. This was truth. This was consequence. This was the price of her own cruelty. When Marcus finished paying, he approached me slowly. "Mom," he said softly, voice breaking, "I'm so sorry." I didn't say anything. Forgiveness isn't something you hand out like leftover cake. He reached for my arm as if wanting to walk me out, but I gently pulled away. "I'll be fine," I said. "You need to go home. There's a lot you two need to talk about." Elizabeth flinched like the words were a slap. Marcus nodded, shame clouding his face. Elizabeth turned away, wiping at her eyes, but it wasn't sadness. It was fury. The cold, burning kind that grows when a person realizes the world no longer believes them. As I walked toward the exit, Malcolm by my side, I heard the last thing she said that night, her voice jagged, splintered. "This isn't over." But she was wrong. It was over. For her. For a brief, fragile moment, I thought the scene at the restaurant might have changed something. Marcus's face had crumbled with remorse. Elizabeth had been stripped bare in front of the entire room. The truth had spoken louder than her carefully crafted lies. But people like her don't accept defeat. They don't retreat. They reload. And she did. Fast. 3 days after the dinner, I received a knock at my door. I opened it expecting a package or a neighbor. Instead, I found a woman in a crisp blazer holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Harris?" she asked. "Yes. I'm with Adult Protective Services. We received an anonymous report expressing concern about your mental well-being and your ability to manage daily tasks." My blood turned cold. Anonymous. Of course. She flipped a page. The report mentioned confusion, impaired memory, leaving the stove on, mismanaging medication. Possible exploitation by your attorney." My jaw tightened until it trembled. She didn't just strike back. She went for my sanity, my freedom, my rights. "May I come in?" the woman asked. I took a slow breath. Malcolm's voice echoed in my mind. "If APS comes, don't panic. Cooperate fully, but call me immediately." "Yes," I said, stepping aside. She entered, looking around the house with the clinical precision of someone trained to detect the smallest sign of instability. She checked the fridge for expired food. She scanned my countertops. She glanced at my medication bottles. She even asked me to recite the date, my address, the year, and the name of the president. I answered each one clearly. "Do you live alone?" she asked. "Yes." "Do family members visit regularly?" I paused. "Not anymore," I said. Her eyes softened, but her pen didn't stop moving. Then came the question I knew was coming. "Has anyone recently shown interest in controlling your finances?" I inhaled slowly. "Yes." "Who?" I closed my eyes. "My daughter-in-law." The woman nodded as if confirming what she already suspected. Before she could ask anything else, I added, "And I have legal documentation showing financial manipulation attempts, unauthorized access to my accounts, and repeated efforts to portray me as mentally incompetent." Her eyebrows shot up. "May I see those?" I didn't answer. I simply dialed Malcolm. He arrived 15 minutes later, binder in hand. By the time he finished presenting evidence, the APS investigator's face had shifted from neutral professionalism to something closer to anger. "Mrs. Harris," she said gently, "based on what I'm seeing here, it appears you are the victim of attempted financial exploitation, not the other way around." "Yes," Malcolm said calmly, "and we're preparing to file formal charges." The investigator exhaled sharply. "I'll close this case today, and I'll also be filing my own report on the false claim made against you." She left, and with her departure, the real war began. 2 weeks later, papers arrived. Legal papers. Elizabeth had filed a petition with the probate court claiming I was experiencing cognitive decline and was unable to independently manage financial responsibilities. She wasn't just trying to control me anymore. She was trying to declare me legally incompetent. Malcolm nearly laughed reading it, but not from amusement, from disbelief. "She made a mistake," he said, tapping the stack. "A fatal one. You don't petition for guardianship when there's a fresh medical capacity evaluation sitting in the system." "And the attempted logins," I reminded him. "And the debt," he added, "and the witnesses." "And the APS report." He nodded. "Exactly. This is desperation." The court date arrived quicker than I expected. I sat in a small courtroom, sunlight filtering through long blinds, dust floating in the beams like microscopic fireflies. Marcus sat on Elizabeth's side, but his posture slumped forward, guilt weighing on him like stones. Elizabeth, on the other hand, looked polished again, hair straightened, makeup perfect, expression calm and wounded. She took the stand first. "Your Honor," she said in a trembling voice, "I love my mother-in-law. I only want to protect her. She forgets things. She gets confused. We're scared she'll be taken advantage of." She dabbed fake tears with a tissue. Then Malcolm stood. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, "could you explain why you attempted to access my client's retirement funds from your home Wi-Fi?" The courtroom went still. Elizabeth choked. I was checking something." "And why?" Malcolm continued. "Did you file a claim with APS accusing her of confusion and instability 3 days after being presented with proof of your own debt and login attempts?" She froze. "And how," he said, raising a sealed envelope, "do you explain this medical capacity evaluation showing that Mrs. Harris is fully competent?" She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She didn't move. Then the judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Wilson, do you have any evidence that supports your petition?" he asked. Silence. "Any witnesses?" Silence. "Any documentation?" Silence. Finally, Marcus stood. "Your Honor," he whispered, voice cracking. I I don't support this. I didn't know what she was doing." Elizabeth spun toward him in horror. "Marcus, sit down!" But he didn't. He sat on my side instead. The courtroom gasped. The judge folded his hands. "Petition denied," he said firmly, "and I strongly suggest Mrs. Wilson seek legal counsel regarding the severity of filing false claims." Elizabeth collapsed into her chair as the gavel struck. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was justice. Raw, undeniable, public. And it was only the beginning of her downfall. When the judge's gavel came down that day, something inside me settled. Quietly, gently, like a piece of my soul finally returning home after being lost too long. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like a release. But life doesn't pause for reflection. It moves on, slowly at first, then all at once. And so did I. 2 weeks after the hearing, I stood on the porch of my old home in Atlanta, looking at the garden I'd tended for 30 years. The hydrangeas bloomed in a heavy cluster of blue, almost glowing under the afternoon sun. My husband planted those the year Marcus was born. I touched one of the petals, soft as silk. Then I whispered, "Thank you." Because gardens hold memories, but they don't heal wounds. I sold the house, not out of anger, out of clarity. It was time to start a chapter that wasn't shadowed by my past. Malcolm drove me to Savannah the day I moved. We took the long route along the coast, passing marshlands glowing gold under the setting sun. The air smelled like salt and pine. I felt it sink into my lungs, cool and cleansing. "This," Malcolm said softly, "is your place, your peace." He was right. My new home was small, modest, with soft yellow walls and an old rocking chair on the front porch. But from the living room window, I could see the water, the endless stretch of blue that rose and fell like a calm heartbeat. My first night there, I slept with the windows open. The ocean's breath lulled me to sleep. For the first time in years, my dreams were quiet. I woke at sunrise to the sound of waves nudging the shore and thought, I survived everything meant to break me, and I am still here. A week later, I wandered into a small cafe on a side street. Magnolia and mint, warm light, wicker chairs, cinnamon rolls bigger than my palm. A group of older women sat knitting at the corner table, chatting like they had known each other for decades. One of them, a silver-haired black woman wearing oversized earrings, looked at me and smiled. "You new around here, baby?" I nodded. "Come sit," she said, waving me over. "Ain't no one lonely in Savannah unless they choose to be." Her name was Louise, a retired teacher with a voice like velvet and a laugh that filled the room. Next to her was Gloria, a former choir singer who talked with her hands. Then Miss Helen, who baked pecan pies so good they could end wars. And Marie, quiet but wise, the glue of the group. They didn't ask for my story, not the painful parts anyway. They talked about recipes, church gossip, who was getting knee surgery next, which beach had the best seashells. And in their laughter, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. One morning, I brought a basket of homemade blueberry muffins, the recipe my mother taught me. Louise took one bite and slapped the table so hard the coffee cups rattled. "Girl," she said, "you better not keep this recipe to yourself." Before I knew it, they had convinced me to host a weekly baking class at the community center. Ladies over 60 who still got it, Louise named the group. The first class had 8 women. By the third week, 12. By month 2, over 20. We baked pound cakes, pies, sweet buns, biscuits, each pastry softening a story, loosening a memory, healing a piece of someone's heart. And somewhere between the flour and laughter, I realized something. I wasn't teaching them. We were healing each other. News travels fast in small towns. A woman from the senior advocacy office heard about the court case and asked if I would speak to a group of older women about financial abuse and boundaries. I hesitated at first. Talking about my pain out loud felt like peeling back a scar. But when I walked into that small room filled with women who looked like me, tired, worried, hopeful, I understood why I needed to be there. I told them, "You're never too old to take back what's yours, and you're never too old to draw a line and say no more." Some cried, some nodded fiercely, some hugged me afterward like I was someone they'd been waiting to meet. Word spread quickly. Soon I was speaking at libraries, community meetings, church gatherings, even small legal workshops run by the county. I didn't become a hero. I became a voice for every woman who'd been silenced by guilt, by manipulation, by family. In my new life, I woke up without dread. I baked without being judged. I walked along the beach without someone watching my every step. I laughed, freely, loudly, without needing permission. And in the evenings, I sat on my porch with sweet tea and watched the sun melt into the horizon, each color reminding me of a piece of myself I had reclaimed. Peace was no longer a dream. It was my reality, my rebirth. And for the first time since my husband passed, I didn't feel alone. I felt whole. 6 months after leaving Atlanta, I stood on the shoreline in Savannah with the water kissing my ankles and the wind curling through my silver braids. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in amber, rose, and soft violet, colors that looked like forgiveness, healing, and quiet strength. I didn't come to the beach that evening to remember anything. I came to honor what I had become. A woman who refused to be erased, a woman who reclaimed her narrative, a woman who chose respect over fear, dignity over silence, and truth over comfort. As the waves rolled in and out, slow, calm, steady, I realized something simple but powerful. I had survived the kind of betrayal that breaks most people, and I had rebuilt myself anyway. I used to think aging meant shrinking, becoming smaller, quieter, more grateful for whatever the world decided to leave for me. I don't believe that anymore. Aging, I've learned, is a sharpening, a clarifying, a return to who you were before life convinced you to dim your own light. At 68, standing on that Savannah shore, I finally understood a truth I wished I had learned decades earlier. Respect is not something you earn with age. It is something you demand with boundaries. People often talk about the fragility of older women. They almost never talk about our fire. They don't talk about the battles we've survived, the families we've held together, the sacrifices we've made that no one thanked us for. They don't talk about the wisdom buried in our wrinkles or the strength in our tired hands. But I know, deeply, fully, that we aren't fragile. We're forged. And when someone tries to break a woman who has lived long enough to know herself, they often forget one thing. She knows how to rebuild. She knows how to rise. She knows how to end a war she didn't start. I don't hate Elizabeth. Hate would mean I still carry her inside me. I don't. But I hope one day she learns what I learned late in life. You cannot build a life on someone else's humiliation. You cannot grow from someone else's destruction. You cannot inherit dignity by stealing it from another. If she ever comes across this story, I hope she hears this clearly. You did not break me. You taught me the power of saying no. And to Marcus, my son, my once lost boy who finally found his way back, I hold this truth. I love you, but loving you will never again mean sacrificing myself. Boundaries do not kill love. They protect it. Now I'm speaking to you, the person listening to this story from your couch, your car, your kitchen, or your quiet room at night. Maybe you saw yourself in my silence. Maybe you recognized the weight of being dismissed, overlooked, or talked down to by someone you once welcomed in your home. Maybe you felt the sting of being called forgetful, fragile, difficult, when you were none of those things. Maybe your dignity has been chipped away so slowly you barely noticed it missing. So let me ask you something. Where in your life have you allowed someone to shrink you? Who have you given power to simply because you were trying to keep the peace? What boundary have you been too afraid to set because you didn't want to look unkind? And here's the most important question. What would your life look like if you finally chose yourself? I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you what choosing myself gave me. Peace, quiet mornings, laughter that wasn't forced, friends who see me, not the version of me someone else painted, a home that feels like mine, a life that feels like breathing again instead of holding my breath. And you deserve that too. You deserve a life where you are not apologizing for existing. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your mother, your grandmother, your aunt, your neighbor, or even yourself, then I want to hear from you. Tell me, have you ever been made to feel small by someone who should have valued you? Have you ever lost a piece of yourself trying to hold on to a family that didn't hold you back? Have you ever taken your power back? Or are you still trying? Share it in the comments. You never know who might be strengthened by your words. And if you want more stories like this, stories of betrayal, resilience, and women who rise stronger than the people who tried to break them, remember to subscribe, share this video, and stay with this community. Because here, your voice matters. Your experience matters. You matter. And don't forget this, from a 68-year-old woman who learned it the hard way, you are never too old to reclaim your dignity, and never too old to start a new life.